I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I know it's the holidays, and so Thursday evenings aren't easy. I would say that, you know, the work that the Transit Coalition does, the work that transit and mobility advocates do make projects like mine possible. I absolutely understand that everybody doesn't always agree on the mobility solutions that might be chosen in a particular place, and those conversations are very difficult. But we aren't able to do our work without people who are willing to understand and learn about these projects and be able to go back into their communities and communicate what's going on in the projects. You know, I am absolutely certain that there's probably never been a project that was perfect in everybody's mind, but also by having these conversations, we're able to fine-tune the projects and make them much better than they would be without going out and getting feedback from folks on, you know, kind of what we're doing. A lot of the things that we're working on, when you're working in the big project world like I am, take a lot of time. You know, these projects, I think we all know, you know, from the time that you know, they're an idea to the time that somebody gets on that first train for revenue service is a long time, because of the thoughtful process that we go through in order to get there. But sometimes it's hard to keep the momentum going as you're moving through to do something like this. And I would say that, you know, the Southern California region, just for your interest or information, spans all the way up to Bakersfield and all the way down to San Diego. So the office that I'm managing is managing the part of the project that crosses the Tehachapi's from Bakersfield to Palmdale, the part of the project that would tunnel under the San Gabriel Mountains from Palmdale into Burbank, the part of the project then that is obviously at that point entering the urban corridors going from Burbank into Los Angeles Union Station down to Anaheim. That's our phase 1 project. Our phase 2 project starts at Los Angeles Union Station. It goes east through the San Gabriel Valley, out into the Inland Empire, and then turns and goes south down to San Diego. So if you take a look at that, if you add that up, that's about 330 miles of the overall 800-mile plan system that we're working on today. And that's a lot of real estate to cover. And so it takes quite a bit of time to conceive how are we going to do this, and to work with people in communities about how you're going to do this, because a project of our nature is something people are going to see. It is not a project you can tuck away, you know, just in the corner, you know, over by the gas station or something like that, right? I mean, it is a big project. The construction of it takes time, and is something that people will live with for a period of time while that's happening. And then, of course, when it's operating, people will be able to see it, and hopefully it will make their lives, it will change their lives in positive ways. So, you know, that's just kind of a little bit of background, you know, in terms of kind of the importance of being able to explain to people what's going on the project, and get that feedback so that we can make those projects more successful. So here, basically on this map, you can see the 800-mile planned all-electric high-speed rail system that the state of California has identified as being an important component of our future mobility in the state. I want to stress that this is not the only type of mobility that the state of California is looking at, that this is meant to complement everything else that we have going on, planned in such a way that it has connections to our other systems and makes all of the other systems work better as well when it comes online. In the navy blue from San Francisco to Anaheim, that's the phase 1 project. That's where we have active construction going on right now, up in the area by Fresno in the Central Valley. And so you can see what that looks like. And then I just mentioned, obviously, that we're working on the section out of the Southern California office on the project features from Bakersfield all the way down here. If you take a look at that map, you see it might be a little hard in the back, you can see the little white dots. That's where we plan to put our stations. If you take this, if you put this on, and maybe this is a GIS activity for you, if you put this alignment on top of a population density heat map for the state of California, this alignment and where these stations are perfectly match the most populated areas of the state of California. So this project is really being planned to provide quick and efficient movement back and forth to the places where we have the densest population, and to really provide them a different kind of transportation and connection to one another than they have today. Here, of course, is a map from the recently released in draft HighSpeed, our state rail plan. And so on here you can see other services beyond HighSpeed Rail and what the state is looking at in terms of 2040 and even 2070 and the connections that we're looking at making in the future. And you can see that going through the middle, this high-speed system forms kind of a backbone or a foundation for the type of mobility that the state is looking at. And you can see that the state is looking at train service going out through Coachella Valley and eventually to Phoenix. You can see that we're thinking about that train service extending out to Las Vegas as well. And this high-speed rail project that we're planning really complements all of these other broader connectivity plans. And it's really about mobility. Many of you are aware, obviously California is a popular place. Our population is growing. By the middle of the century, we're probably going to add about 10 million people to the population. And so we need to be planning now for how we make sure that those people still can move about to get to school, to get to work, to get to the grocery store, etc., whether it's a short trip or a long trip, hopefully as well as they do today. If we're lucky, better than we do today. And so that's why you start planning a project like we're working on. And I talked a little bit about the fact that the high-speed rail project offers something in terms of land transportation, terrestrial transportation, that's a little bit different than what we've got today. And so I kind of jokingly call it the fact that it can warp the space-time continuum, if you will, for terrestrial travel. So right now, this that you're looking at shows if you got in a car in one of the urban areas, either in Northern California or Southern California, and you were going to drive 2 hours at 55 miles per hour, what is the range that you would have? If you were willing to invest 2 hours of your time to travel somewhere, how far could you get? That's shown here on this map. This is how far you could get with high-speed rail, right? All of a sudden it closes the gap across the state. So if you're willing to invest 2 hours in a trip on high-speed rail, you can get from Southern California basically up into the Central Valley and into Northern California, right? You can get from Burbank to San Jose, for instance. And so this opens up the whole state to people. This means that where you choose to live isn't destiny in terms of where you work or where you go to school, that you can get there on a service like this, and obviously you're going to the major cities, you're going to the major metropolitan areas in a different way with a different speed than you can today, and it connects our economies in ways that we will learn throughout the time that this actually is connected in terms of what those benefits are. But it really is something that's really important, and it's really important here in Southern California. For instance, Palmdale to Burbank right now. If you were going to go from the San Fernando Valley to the Antelope Valley, if you were going to go, between the hours of 5 and 8 a.m. in the morning, from the Antelope Valley down to the San Fernando Valley, and then, between 3:30 and 6:30 in the evening, that drive could take you 2 hours, maybe more. If you were going to get on Metrolink and take that trip is between an hour and a half and an hour and 45 minutes. With high-speed rail, with the routes that we're looking at right now, that trip is between 15 and 20 minutes. And if you think about the things going on in the Antelope Valley right now, we're going to build new fighter jets up there, right? Northrop is up there. We have CHSRA up there putting together trains for LA Metro. We have BYD up there building electric buses. There are a lot of jobs available to people up there. And when you talk about, Bart mentioned equity as being really important. Equity is important in terms of people being able to get rides or take trips that meet their budget, but it's also important in terms of what it opens up for people. So that's really the big idea behind a system like ours. It's not meant initially, it's not meant at face value to solve the issues about how you get to the grocery store on the corner, but it's meant to open up a broader mobility. And you can see here basically on the top, this is a graph that shows how efficient or where high-speed rail's sweet spot is in terms of the transportation spectrum. And it trips from 1 to 600 miles. High-speed rail is really the most efficient type of transportation that you could use. It costs us as a society less per person per mile on high-speed rail in trips in that sweet spot than any of the other types of transportation modes we have available to us. So it makes sense in California. We're a state that has that kind of geography. And then here, of course, California is definitely very, very interested in climate change and doing the things that we can as a state to address it. And so high-speed rail is something that goes into the negative category, right? It helps us do better on climate change issues as opposed to some of our other types of transportation. So it helps us balance our offering here and overall do better in the future. Often we get asked, particularly in Southern California, because we're a little ways removed, is high-speed rail really happening? What's going on with the project? And I mentioned before we have construction going on in the Central Valley. There's a couple of firms here that are associated with some of that, or people who work at firms, they may not be personally. So these are pictures of our construction site up in the Central Valley in the Fresno area. We have over 10 active construction sites now, and we're investing about $3 billion essentially in the construction that we're doing in the Central Valley right now. That investment has dramatically changed the economy in those counties that we're working in. And so I mentioned, obviously, in some of the other maps, had a higher level look at what we're doing here in Southern California. You can see on this map then specifically what I was talking about. In the turquoise is the Bakersfield to Palmdale that crosses the Tehachapi's. Those of you who are transportation aficionados know that we have a train tracks across the Tehachapi's right now, but they go in a 360-degree loop, so it doesn't really move people quickly from the Antelope Valley up to the Central Valley, so we're planning something a little different, obviously. We get to Palmdale to Burbank. You can see there that we're looking at several routes. It's probably the most controversial piece of the project that we're working on in Southern California, which is not to say that there aren't concerns, obviously. Again, this is a big project, but that final decision will be a very significant decision. There will probably be a lot of press surrounding that. In the recent 2 years, we've been out and we drilled in those mountains. We drilled holes that were, one of the holes was more than 2,000 feet deep, and we brought up a bunch of rocks so that we could study it, so that we could understand how to build a tunnel underneath the mountains, because it turns out that's what folks do around the world. When they're trying to build a train and there's a mountain in the way, they build a tunnel under it and they go out the other end. So that's what we're looking at doing there. Then we join the urban corridor, obviously down to Anaheim, and you can see LA to San Diego over here. Really important, this closes passenger rail gaps. Right now, you're not going to be taking a passenger rail trip across the Tehachapi's. If you want to take a passenger rail trip, you would get on an Amtrak bus at Union Station, you'd take a bus to Bakersfield, you get on the train there. So it closes that gap, it gives passenger service there, and it also closes the passenger service gap here. Right now you don't go between Riverside County and San Diego County on a rail system, and so it would offer that type of connectivity and connection there as well. And I mentioned the fact that it does take a long time to do projects like this, and so the HighSpeed Rail Agency has looked at opportunities that we can partner with other local operators to make improvements that will ultimately pave the way for high-speed rail, but that in the shorter term allow them to operate better. And so some of the things that we identified for early investments included the regional connector. So thank you for representing Regional Connector today, appreciate it. We put $100 million or so into that. We also looked at the positive train control projects going on across California and felt that it was really important that we contributed to those, because it is unacceptable to have trains running into other trains with the modern 21st century technology that we have. So Metrolink is now running the positive train control. Essentially, it's something that senses, knows where every train is, and it senses if a train doesn't slow down or stop at a signal, or seems to be getting too close to another train, and it basically prevents that from happening. It can actually shut the train down so that it would stop and the trains wouldn't run into each other. So that is a really good thing. We've also put a lot of money into new locomotives around the state. Metrolink is getting Tier 4 locomotives now, which reduce the emissions by about 85% over the Tier 0 locomotives. So we're going to be running cleaner Metrolink trains around Southern California. They are faster, they are quieter, and they are stronger. They can pull longer trains. So Metrolink would be able to offer better service. And then we're looking at some other projects that are also very interesting and beginning to come online. Looking at grade separation projects, we've got the Rosecrans-Marquardt grade separation project, which is south of Los Angeles. It is at the top of the list that the state keeps of the grade separations that we most want to build, because the at-grade crossings are that dangerous where people are getting hurt. So we have been able to partner with Metro and other local agencies, and that project is nearing the end of its design phase and will go into construction in the next year or two, so we're excited about that. And then really one of the biggest and most complicated projects that change really how train service work in Southern California is the Link Us project. It used to be called the Script project. It's basically run through tracks for this station here, so that the trains basically don't all come in from the north and leave from the north, but rather then you will have a south throat to these tracks, basically going over the 101 freeway, so that trains, if they're coming from the south, they can just pull directly in, stop, and go. If they're coming from the north, the same thing. There will also be a loop track, so they could come back and circle back directly if they needed to go north or south, or they could circle around and go east out to San Bernardino. This will really change how Metrolink can deploy their fleet, because often their trains are sitting here in Union Station 30, 40 minutes as they're doing crew changes and different things. Turning Union Station into a through station is something that will really allow, I think, them to offer more service more frequently other places, because they won't have their locomotives sitting here tied up at the station. And so, one of the things that's talked about a lot is infrastructure, and what is that impact of infrastructure when you're doing it. And so Here's a slide that talks a little bit about it. When you're investing in infrastructure like this, whether it be LA Metro, whether it be LAX, any of the owners in Southern California, essentially you have the direct effects of your investment, you have indirect effects of your investment, and then you have induced effects of your investment, right? So our direct effects, obviously, we're hiring contractors, we have people working for us doing the work. Our indirect effects, we gotta buy things in order to do the work, whether it be concrete or computers or those types of things. And then the induced effects, of course, if we're putting people to work, then what are they doing? What are they now able to do in terms of recreation? Where are they living? That kind of thing. And so that's why infrastructure gets talked a lot about in terms of its importance when you're thinking about it, building it, and then when it's in use, obviously. And so our project, from 2006 to 2016, we invested about $2.3 billion. We employed 630 different firms. 94% of the work being done on this project is being done by California firms and California workers. And 52% of the investments that we're making have been made into disadvantaged communities. So talking about the equity is really important. And you can see essentially the investment ultimately results in an economic output of $3.5 to $4 billion. We also have a very robust small business program. Most large agencies like ours do. So we are employing over 417 certified small businesses as we put this project together, and you can see where they're from. 13 of them obviously come from outside of the state, but the rest of those small businesses are small businesses that are headquartered within the state of California. And we also have, like most large agencies, we have specific programs that deal with how we bring people into the construction industry to work on our projects. So far to date, in our construction project in the Central Valley, we've got over 1,500 construction workers that have been dispatched up there. 17 active construction sites, over 10 for sure. 230 active small businesses and 500 pre-apprentice graduates. So we specifically put in our contracts that we wanted to have a pathway for people to employment as part of our job. And we have taken, the cue basically from the state of California, the importance in California about climate change and sustainability. And so we have a multifaceted sustainability program associated with the HighSpeed Rail project. Whether it be the infrastructure, whether it be the energy we ultimately use, which we have said will be all green energy, whether it be the natural resources and how we protect them as we build the project, the business management component, or just the features, right? Non-potable water at our construction sites, recycled concrete at our construction sites, Tier 4 construction equipment, those kinds of things to make sure that we are walking the walk and talking the talk. And here is the overall timeline for the project. In 2005, we basically roughly defined the routes that were shown on that early map. And from there, we began to work on defining the projects. Most of our projects go station to station, essentially, so we break it up in a little bit more manageable pieces. And then you can see slowly over time, Arctic, we had a ribbon cutting, so that station down there was designed to accommodate high-speed rail. Those overpass bridges are designed so that they can be extended and go over to another set of tracks that high-speed rail would eventually stop at. So that's our first high-speed rail station that was open for business. Back in 2014, we had our groundbreaking. And we are actively in the process right now, obviously, of making those route selections here in Southern California, which is really the very difficult work of a project like ours because, there are a lot of considerations to take into account. And of course, our 2016 business plan identified that we would have that route north to south completed in 2029. And here are some of the kind of recent activities and future-looking activities in terms of procurement for our project. We are just bringing on a contract for an early train operator, so basically experts who are operating trains in this particular group came from Germany, who have experience operating high-speed rail in Germany, and come to us to sit with us and give us their input in terms of what has worked for them and what has not worked for them. So we make sure that we're planning for a business, a high-speed rail business, not just planning the routes. And of course, we will have to go out and purchase trains, rolling stock, so that will be one of the next procurements coming out. We recently worked with the federal government to open a pilot program for the state of California to act in place of the federal government for the NEPA process, so that's called NEPA assignment. The state of California has that for highways right now. We are basically working with the federal government to get that for our rail projects as well, because that can help you streamline the process. It doesn't circumvent this process, it doesn't change the considerations that are given as you plan it, but it does help you do it in a little bit more efficient way. And then of course we will have tracking systems. One of the things particularly I noticed some people talked about stations or stationary development. Our station contracts will be separate, held out separate, or that is the current plan, so they will be design bid build contracts, not design build contracts, and that would be something to be looking for in terms of procurements over the course of the next 12 to 18 months as well. And that's it. That's my talk. If you want to.
From the air to the ground, from the highways to the country roadway, wherever you are from Madera to Fresno, construction of high-speed rail is just about everywhere you look. There are now 12 active construction sites located within Construction Package 1, and one that is now complete. A ribbon cutting was held at the Tuolumne Street Bridge in early August, and it's now open to drivers.
You're in the history books, you are now, you have been from the beginning, and Fresno is the prominent player in the development of high-speed rail in the state of California.
The huge moments will keep coming. 2 more project sites are nearly complete. Final work is being done at the Fresno River Viaduct and Cottonwood Creek, both projects just outside the city of Madera. Safety is a major concern for the project. High-speed rail will eliminate at-grade crossings in the Central Valley. That includes Road 27, Avenue 8, and Avenue 12 in Madera County, and one of our newest projects at American Avenue in South Fresno. These 4 overcrossings will take cars over our tracks, as well as freight tracks, and are in various stages of construction. The realignment of State Route 99 continues through Central Fresno. This 2-mile stretch, being managed by Caltrans, includes the demolition and construction of 3 bridges, as well as moving the highway about 100 feet to the west. Another realignment project is in the beginning stages. This one will move Golden State Boulevard to make way for high-speed rail tracks. Utility relocations are currently underway along the roadway. The program's only below-grade project continues to move forward. You can now clearly see the outlines of the Fresno Trench and State Route 180 passageway. This project will eventually carry our trains under freight lines, a canal, and State Route 180. Finally, the 2 signature structures in and out of the city of Fresno are taking shape. The Cedar Viaduct in South Fresno is the program's most visible project, stretching high into the air just east of State Route 99. Once across the highway, this structure will connect to the Muscat Avenue Viaduct. In North Fresno, crews are constructing columns on the north and south side of the San Joaquin River. But more noticeable for now is the dozens of columns that have been constructed for the pergola that will allow high-speed trains to pass over the top of the UP tracks. Pre-construction activities are also underway in Construction Package 2-3, and Construction Package 4 is in the early stages of construction. In all, there are 119 miles of construction in the Central Valley. California High
Kind of a lot for 7:15 in the afternoon. Anyway, so that's it. That's high-speed rail at kind of a high level. If anybody has any
Can we get
questions?
copies of those slides?
Yeah. We'll provide them to Bart and he can distribute them.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about the design bid build, the design build, is that what you said? Or, yeah, and whether there are opportunities for transit-oriented development associated with that P3 type of thing.
Yes. So at our station, in most of our station sites, we have initiated station area planning so that we're looking at working with the local city or agency to kind of look at the area more broadly around the station than we would typically look at. You know, we're looking at a station, we're looking at parking usually. And to take a look at the things that they might be able to do or that they should do as we move forward in the future in terms of zoning, in terms of density, in terms of connectivity, the things that they may want to do as a city to kind of reflect the future that they see. That's different than what they have now because of the station. So we start there. Those plans are not in our documents. Those plans are not in our environmental documents, but they are things that we are actively engaged in with the cities. Typically, an agency like ours is able to purchase the land associated with our project. So we identify station footprint, we identify parking footprint, and we cover all of those things. We have a transit and land use committee, which I would strongly urge you to go check out our website. The information is there. They meet monthly, as does our board. Our board chair is actually the chair of the transit and land use committee. And go back on our website and take a look over the months of the things that have been talked about there. We are very much interested in that, in being able to truly move from that being a good idea to that really being a tool to use. And it's really complicated. It has a lot to do with the size of the cities and the tax base the cities may have. It has a lot to do with what the cities see their city being in the future, right? What types of land use or activities that they would like around the station, what types of other transportation they're looking at around the station. And so we've been kind of wrestling, and then what kind of mechanisms, what kind of legal mechanisms do you have really to bring that into play, and how many parties need to get involved in that? So absolutely looking at that.
What's the schedule for the environmental to be complete for the various pieces down here?
The various pieces down here will be completed now. We've recently been going through a process of updates with the FRA. They had, and that's part of why we're looking at the assignment right now. So the assignment could change that, but the FRA was having, our NEPA agency was having a hard time keeping up. So they sort of said, whoa, slow down a little bit. Right now we plan to complete either in 2019 or 2020. So 2020 would be Palmdale to Burbank, 2019 would be the Bakersfield piece and the urban pieces.
So you Burbank to LA in 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you did
18, 20, yeah, I mean, 2019 could be
sometime.
2 years. Yes.
How are you guys doing this so much faster than Metro's building the subway?
We're not, like, we're really, it does not feel like we are. Anyway, that's what
It's not.
It's just not, yeah. No, it's not. It's hard, it's very hard to do a
A few
project.
less people living where they're building,
Yeah.
most of it.
No, they're going hundreds of miles, Metro's going 5 miles.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it. Well, I mean, we haven't started building, you know, the urban corridor stuff down here, and that's so complicated because you have to keep everything operational, or more or less keep everything operational when you're building, right? You have to keep the businesses running, you have to keep the streets generally running, you have to keep emergency routes open, and then if you're working in an active corridor, you have to keep the other trains running. And so the staging that requires is so complicated that it just adds time. You know, if you could shut you send everybody, hey, Los Angeles, why don't you guys all go to New York for, 2 years, right? Then you could probably build it very, very quickly and easily. But because you have to consider all of these other things, it's a lot peskier than you think.
And the regional connector just recently discovered that they've got huge utility problems that they didn't, they knew were there, but didn't realize you could have to basically rebuild it all. But put a year onto the regional connection.
It turns out that, so basically a city has a series of as-built plans, right, that the city keeps, right? So over the course of, 100 years, 200 years, wherever the city's been, right, they keep the plans, theoretically. Keep the plans of everything that's been built. The problem is when you get in the ground, you usually find out they didn't keep the plans of everything that's been built. And so you have a plan to build your project in a certain way, and you get in the ground and you're like, where the heck did that come from, right? And it's because it's not on the plan, it was built in, 1925 or something, and nobody knew it was there. And so, that's the other really complex thing about working in the urban environment is that happens a lot more. When you're up in Fresno, the project I'm working on obviously starts in Bakersfield, goes across the Tehachapi's. There are not that many people living up there, right? There are a large stretch of land. We go, for 10 miles, we go across to Home Ranch, right? It's all right. There's unlikely to be a surprise under Tejon Ranch unless, we struck oil or something, which would be counterproductive to our electricity. But so, those are the things that the projects deal with, and it's just really, it's really difficult. It would be awesome if we thought ahead enough to build all of this mobility that we needed before we built the city. Right, and that's how they built the original railroads, right? And then the cities came to them, right? They basically spurred the growth of the cities. The cities are all basically arrayed around the locations where they had stations, right? I mean, this was a station. We had a Fred Harvey house. That's right over there on the other side of the tracks. That's just one of the really difficult things that we deal with.
How would the 2028 Olympics influence your project?
Hopefully really well. So if you take a look at the venues, and I don't know how many of you follow the 2028 Olympics, and where all of the activities are going to take place, but they are actually laid out around the Metrolink system. So if you take a look at the Sepulveda Basin, if you take a look at the Bonelli Park for the bikes in San Bernardino, if you take a look at the lake out in Riverside, Anaheim, the volleyball is going to be played at the Honda Arena. Our rail system could form a really wonderful connection between all of those venues. And so the work that we're doing basically is in Burbank to Anaheim is improving that urban core corridor to accommodate high-speed rail, but also accommodate more frequent Metrolink. And then moving out from there, obviously, you've got the Metrolink Riverside line, you've got San Bernardino and some other places that you could do improvements to get to everything. Metro has released, or LA has released a 28 for 28 that talk about the projects in Measure M or on the books in LA and LA County that they would like to advance and get completed by the Olympics as well. Because there is the Athletes Village is over at UCLA, obviously, so we need that subway connected and completed all the way out to Westwood to provide that kind of connectivity. And there's, others that they're looking at as well. So typically, the Olympics can be something that bring people together with a common cause in terms of having an interest in completing something by a date, putting a hard opening date on a project like the subway maybe, right? So it'll be open by 28.
Well, here's something interesting. I went to an event, listened to the head of Metro speak, and when they thought we were gonna have the 2024 Olympics, before they do the Paris, she said, Metro guaranteed the Olympic Committee that we got the 24, the Purple Line would be done. And I was like, raised my hand and said, well, why do you need the Olympics to pick up the 4 years? But I didn't say anything.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it helps, it helps people double down. Yeah, it helps people double down, and it creates mechanisms, within government for loans or for different kinds of things that can be used to advance the project.
But you were right. It is good that all these different organizations are working together because of the Olympics.
Yeah. It makes us think about each other, right? Which is good. So then you actually have projects that speak to each other. Don't pass each other in the night.
You're right.
Yeah, the HighSpeed Rail project, considering the number of miles and the extent of construction that's going on, is one of the major projects in California over the next decade or more. And it occurs to me, you mentioned NEPA, and you mentioned the recycling of concrete and stuff like that. The state has certain standards for meeting recycling, and there's a lot of earth being excavated, there's a lot of demolition going on, and there are opportunities to recycle some of these things within communities, to create parks, to create spaces. I'm wondering whether part of your plan, part of the plans of HighSpeed Rail, includes the recycling of those materials back into community. I say that in the context that right now, a lot of material like concrete and asphalt and also soil gets dumped in dumps at some distance and not reused. And there's
It's all getting reused.
It is not all getting reused. I did a study
90%
of
of it
it.
is.
No, it's actually
On
being
our
taken to
project.
intermediate stops and called recycling, and then taken to dump sites. I've been studying what happens with it, and some of it is getting reused, but a small percentage. More is stated as being reused. I checked with the county, and I looked at how they keep track of their records. They don't.
So
So that is a really good point. Inroads are being made to do that. That is our goal. I'm not certain from your comments whether you're talking about our project or other projects in
It's happening.
general. Yes, that's what I thought.
6 million tons
Yes,
of
yes, you're
concrete
talking about
dumped
the
every
industry in
year.
general, that's what I thought. So I would say that our project's being run a little bit differently. And we have very, very strong sustainability guidelines. I would urge you to go online and read through those. We also do a yearly sustainability report, started last year, our new one's out this year. And you would be really surprised by the effectiveness of some of the programs that we've implemented on our project. And I think the thing that is really surprising people about some of those programs is oftentimes people have a knee-jerk reaction to think that if I do these things, it's going to cost me more. And I think that there are definitely cases on our project where we're finding it actually doesn't cost more. And so there's research that can be done about the ways that we're doing our project that might be able to positively impact the way people think about their projects as a whole.
I want to be clear, on the highways, it is being recycled. I'm aware of that. I've looked at Caltrans and what's happening on the 5 freeway. I've seen actually the operation, and it is being recycled. And there is a positive way of doing it. But there's over 6 million tons of concrete that's being dumped, and it's in public. It's not just Metro I'm talking about.
No, you're talking
Public
about the
works in
industry
general.
as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand, yeah. No, there might be some really useful information that can be gleaned from studying what we're doing and actually the cost of what we're doing versus the return and the benefits that could help other owners with policies.
So miles and miles of construction and accelerated construction is really what I think would be of interest. And how you guys going about getting design details and constructions that it would be efficient, but it's not conventional, it's very innovative. Are we getting those approved and working with?
So essentially, we are running the construction projects we have right now as design-build projects. So we go out and hire a contractor, a designer contractor team at about a 35% design level to complete the design and then construct it, so that we have the knowledge of the contractor involved in the completion of the design, so we don't have to, do any marriage counseling between designers and contractors anymore. They do that on their own. So that's awesome. We also have an ATC process, right, where during the bidding process, the team's bidding can come to the authority and say, your 35% design shows XYZ thing. We think if you did ABC thing, that would be more cost effective. That actually works better for our construction schedule, it works better, whatever, right? Those get submitted, each team submits theirs to the authority, and then we evaluate them and we determine which of them that we're willing, that the authority believes make sense to accept. I don't think that we universally accept them all, but I think we accept a lot. Not my area. I say Bergen. But yeah, I mean, we are looking for ways to do, design build used to be kind of innovative. It's really not that innovative anymore. Most large agencies are doing it. We're not going to do that at our station locations for our stations because the fit and finish is very important at the stations, and it seems more appropriate to take it to a higher level design. But we also have an unsolicited proposal policy that allows people to submit proposals to the authority to do XYZ thing, I don't know, finish the whole thing really fast by 2028. And how you would do it, and we have a mechanism basically to go through a process where we would accept those proposals and we would move forward. This is kind of the trend with owners like ours. I believe Metro has an unsolicited proposal process as well. And then, if you look at our business plans, we have always assumed that the private sector would get involved, that there would be a P3 component to our project. When you look at HighSpeed Rail around the world, of all the transportation offerings tends to fuel public-private partnerships, maybe more so than most other types of, you don't really see that, maybe in the light rail world or other things. And so we do absolutely expect and hope that will happen, and then ultimately we will run the project as a business. So we are building a business. When it is built, we will go out and solicit a contract from an operator to operate the system. Basically, the authority would be a very small group at that time to make sure, certify, that they're doing everything they said, that they're operating it safe. But basically they would be operating it as a business, and they would be paying the state a fee for that ability to do that. So hopefully we've built in, the ways to get the best possible project and the most modern possible project.
I'm curious about the NEPA assignment process. Where does that stand, and when do you think a decision will be made?
It is out to public review right now, so if you go online and, kind of Google it, you will see that we put out a public announcement, to say that basically this was a pilot program that the state of California would take on. We identified several projects as potential, lead projects for that. One of them is the Link Us project here. One of them turns out is the West Santa Ana branch as well. I'm, a little bit terrified, I guess. We believe that so it's in the comment period right now, that closes. We discuss, with the feds how and why and where everything works. And should those conversations go well, I believe we would be able to pick that up in about the March, April timeframe of 2018. Oh my gosh, it's 2018 on.
And then that affects the environmental documents that are currently in preparation and like the FRA's role on those? Or
It does. It does not change anything except the people who spend time reviewing the document. Right? So yes, those documents, the high-speed rail documents themselves that are in progress, then would be reviewed for NEPA efficacy by a strike team of NEPA experts, cordoned off and separate, right, from the project. So basically just acting in the federal government's stead.
But CEQA would be doing that.
And CEQA, we're already doing that, right? Yeah. So no, we don't, nothing goes away. We still have NEPA, we still have CEQA, we still have EIR, EIS, we still do the full review.
To what extent is community issues entering into NEPA, the environmental assessment?
Well, I mean, obviously, the environmental process requires a community consultation process. And we go above and beyond the strict letter of the law in terms of that. So we typically have many meetings, not just meetings with the scoping, the release of the draft, and then with the final, to solicit community input. And it is absolutely something that is critical to, it's the law. And it's critical to us being able to design a project that we can build someday.
Yeah, the three alternatives being studied between Palmdale and Burbank. What's the plan, the time frame for this study to be done?
The time frame for Palmdale to Burbank, it would be to have the environmental document concluded in the first half of 2020. For that one. So that's been that specific one with the tunnels under the San Gabriel Mountains, the one that I noted, is probably the most complicated section that we're working on here. We start in the Antelope Valley, which is high desert, and we end up in Burbank, right? Which is the tunnels are. The overall tunneling on the route is around 20 miles. It ranges from just under 20 miles to just under 25 miles, depending on which route. It's not a single tunnel, but there are some fairly long tunnels. The last year or so, they opened a tunnel underneath the Swiss Alps, for instance, that's like 35 miles long. So it is something that is favored worldwide in terms of what you do to get a train from one side of a mountain to the other side.
So all three of these alternatives are entirely or mostly tunnel?
Yes, all three of the alternatives have the largest proportion in tunnel. And you can go on our website and take a look at the pictures there. We typically color code our projects so that if it looks green, you think grass, it's on the, it's at level. If it's blue, it's a bridge, it's in the air. And if it's pink or red looking, that indicates a tunnel. So if you go online and pull up our project maps, you can see that. But yes, all the way from, it comes out of Palmdale, it crosses the San Andreas Fault, thank you, up there at grade. That's the safest way to cross a fault that has a potential slip of 18 or more feet in an incident. And then it comes through the pass there where Metrolink comes through, and then it would basically be diving into a tunnel going a little bit to the west or going more straight through that area where the power lines are up there. And then the tunnels basically stays in tunnel underneath the San Gabriel Mountain complex, and then would come up. There's several locations. One is north of Hanson Dam, and it would come around. And then the really controversial one, as you know, is the one that would potentially surface and bridge over the wash and the 210 freeway.
So the idea of a blended approach with Metrolink from Palmdale to Burbank is not, it's not a consideration. It's not one of the alternatives.
This is what we're looking at right now. These were the alternatives that we have been studying. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about, is there some other way to look at it? The real challenge with the Metrolink line is the fact that it is much longer and it's not very straight. And so it is very, very difficult to get that travel time from Palmdale to Burbank faster by just putting another track next to Metrolink and electrifying them. In fact, it would be impossible to get, obviously, the time that we're looking at, 15 to 20 minutes. So our statutes require us to move it to 2 hours and 40 minutes, as you know, from LA Union Station to the Transbay. And so that means time is important to us in the calculation when we're planning our project. It doesn't mean that things can't happen, legislation can't be passed that change that, but right now those have been the ideas that have risen to the fore. But I would expect a lot of discussion to still go on before we land on what we're building.
Yeah, because all the San Fernando Valley, the whole area is going to be bypassed in terms of linkage. You know, the train's going to come out of the mountains and stop at Burbank, so all the area west of there isn't served. And you know, the blended approach seems to work out pretty well from San Jose to San Francisco. I don't understand why.
Right. And so once we get to Burbank, then we are employing the blended. Yeah, we are employing the blended approach from Burbank down to Anaheim.
Yeah, but west of there is no blended approach. So the existing commuter service from Palmdale to Burbank will still be the old tracks, and the high-speed rail will be entirely different.
That has been the way that we have been planning the project. Yes, correct. So basically it allows Metrolink to focus on serving, obviously, Santa Clarita between the up and down between. So if you have a station in Palmdale and a station in Burbank, then Metrolink obviously provides connections back and forth up to Santa Clarita, and from Palmdale back and forth up to Santa Clarita to Palmdale. So again, you know, the systems aren't meant to duplicate some of the things that are happening, you know, with other systems. They're meant to meet them. So at our stations, we would have Metrolink at our station, basically, so you have very convenient transfers between the two services. But the trips that people would be taking on those would probably be different. But, you know, there's always more to study. You know, it would be great if you could do it all. I don't know if you can, but we'll keep working on it.
What's the vision for high-speed rail as it relates to the Link Plus project?
High-speed rail would have a blended approach, basically, from Burbank. So we would be expanding the corridor between Burbank and LA Union Station, electrifying 2 of the tracks, traveling alongside the other trains. We would travel in the North Road, and we would bring our trains in and use Link Us, and then exit to the south. I mean, it would be absolutely seamless in terms of the services serving the station. There would be, tracks, electrified tracks, one platform or maybe two platforms, so with 2 or 4 electrified tracks that high-speed rail trains would pull up to. Right, and they would be right next to all of the other tracks where Lausanne and Metrolink were utilizing, coming into. Our system would be built so that those trains could utilize our tracks as well. It would be interoperable. They could travel under the catenary if needed to recover an emergency situation. Obviously, our trains need to have the electric catenary, so we wouldn't be able to use the whole facility. 45, I'm going to wrap it up and say last question. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming to learn a little bit about high-speed rail. Hopefully, maybe you learned one thing that you didn't know. Again, please join us. Please join us at our public meetings. Please continue to ask hard questions about the project so that we end up doing, the best project that we can. Thanks.